In a startup environment, you wear different hats. You feel like they fit well or not, but you have to wear them because someone has to. So if you're thinking about it and you're like, I'm not sure because I don't have all the skills that might be required, do it. Finding a way to get a good idea out there on the market that can be profitable for the people that have spent an insane amount of time and effort in building that idea.
Kia ora and welcome to LabMates Beyond the Bench. This is a podcast that's sharing the stories of scientists and their research and how they move from the lab bench and into the real world. And today we have Gio, and we're going to hear a little bit about his academic to non-academic career journey, what he's been up to for the last couple of years. And yeah, I'm just really excited to hear about his journey, his lessons learned, and what it's like, and what's happening down in Christchurch. So could you tell us a little bit about what you studied?
Yeah, of course. Kia ora, first of all. So my background was first in biotechnology. So I'm from Italy, as my name probably tells you. I studied Bachelor of Biotechnology there, and then I did a master degree in molecular biotechnology. And that's like our education, tertiary education system is a bit different. And after my master, I actually moved to the south of Germany, where I started a PhD in neuroscience over there. But I think I should say this because I think it's helpful for people that are starting their PhD, because that didn't go so well. So I did a 1 year of PhD there, and then I realized that I wasn't enjoying the project I was working on, and I wasn't very happy working on that. And I think when you start a PhD, if your heart is not in what you are working on, a PhD is already quite hard. So if you just force yourself on a research topic, is going to be double difficult. Mm-hmm. So basically, after 1 year, I quit that. I talked to my supervisor and I explained to him that I was feeling, and he was very supportive. And quit that, went back home, and I want to share this experience because a lot of people that start a PhD, basically, they sort of don't see it that way. They don't see it as a job that they can quit if they're not happy with. And that's because you are frowned upon. If you put in your CV that you start a PhD, you are frowned upon if you quit it. And people will ask questions. And that happened to me when I applied for another PhD position. People would ask me all the time, why did you quit it? Why do you want to start another PhD? You know, you have to have a reason. You have to motivate your life choice. But anyway, long story short, I was applying for another PhD, and I found a PhD in project in Dunedin that I actually enjoyed. Again, in neuroscience, just different topic, was more cognitive neuroscience, so neuroscience of behavior, which always fascinated me. And I moved to New Zealand a bit more than 7 years ago, and I did my PhD in Dunedin at University of Otago for 4 years, went through the COVID motions, and towards the end of my PhD, I realized that I didn't want a career in academia, so I pivot.
Yeah, we'll get you to pause there and then go back to like the quitting. Quitting is such a negative term for maybe realizing that you're not the right person for that project, and that's not something you wanted to do. Because how old were you at that? Were you 25, 23, 25?
I was 26 when I quit my PhD.
So it's especially if you've kind of gone straight through your study, having to stop because it's not the right thing for you is actually quite a big deal. Like, having the guts to say this isn't for me and walking away from something is not something that a lot of people consider doing. And your supervisor was really supportive, which is, again, like, that's really cool to hear. Do you think that was an easy thing to do? Was it a hard thing to do? Did you feel supported by other people around you with that decision?
It was hard and then easy, if it makes sense. So it was really hard because, and again, I want to put this out there for people that might be in the same situation. I felt like, although it was my decision, and I use the word quit because in Germany, PhD is a job. It's not, you got a job contract from the university. So it wasn't my right to terminate that contract. Okay. But I felt like a failure. I felt like I failed. I tried and I started something and I didn't finish. And so that was really hard. But it was also hard to kind of get up in the morning and find the motivation to go to the lab and do the work. So I was really between, the rock and the hard place, as they say, right? Yeah. And I got a lot of support from family and friends, of course, back home, which, I mean, I think they could tell, and even other friends that were doing PhDs at the same time. They were really supportive. I don't think anyone told me you're making a mistake or you should finish this. They were like, if you're not happy, you should change. So I definitely got a lot of support, and then it kind of got easier because when I went back home and kind of regroup, I realized was the right decision. It wasn't that immediate. I went through again a phase where I was really hard on myself. I always been really hard on myself, and I was like, I failed. I didn't handle that well. I should have, I don't know, see it coming, all those sort of, mental lies that I was sort of telling myself. And till I realized, okay, that happened.
Yeah.
I made the right choice.
And I guess knowing what you want to study after something like that, your priorities are way more aligned and you've thought about what you really want. So going into a PhD after that, you probably felt a lot more secure about what it is you're after. How did you find your PhD position all the way in New Zealand, and why?
I think it's been a few years, but I think there is a website called findaphd.com. Yeah, so it is for PhD position, postdocs, and other science-related position in the academia world. So yeah, I just basically put in the keywords: neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, behavior, memory, all of that stuff. And I started looking at, so the filter was set on Europe first. And then, as I said, I was kind of struggling to go past the stigma of having a PhD that I didn't finish and wanted to start another one. So I basically, that filter became like, I started looking at US, I started looking at Singapore, I started looking at Australia, I started looking at New Zealand. And that's basically how I end up finally getting somewhere, essentially. Because again, I was getting interviews, but I feel like, having the uncompleted PhD in my CV, which I couldn't hide, was pulling me back a bit. So I decided to go wider, and that's how I found the position in here in New Zealand.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
You at that point, were you thinking that you wanted to do anything academic after your PhD? Like, did you come into that PhD knowing that you wanted to do something more industry or biotech kind of focused, or were you thinking that an academic career might be what you're going to do after your PhD, or were you just here for the PhD and then head back home? Like, what was your kind of plans at that point?
Well, I always been wanted to be a scientist, some kind of scientist, since I was little. So I basically went on with that since I got to university. When I started university and I started biotech, which was really sort of hot new science back when I started, like more than 10 years ago now. I wanted to save the world, essentially. So I want to be a scientist, I want to be a professor, and I want to save the world. And I was a bit more humble when I started my PhD. So I knew I wasn't going to save the world, but I still wanted a career in academia. I still wanted to be a professor and PI one day. And that's how I started my PhD. Not necessarily in New Zealand. I always wanted to move to the US and work for one of the big universities over there.
Yeah.
So that was my plan, my life plan when I started my PhD.
So that's how you came in, and then you started studying your PhD, and like I'm assuming life happened. So what made you change your track, and like what kind of led you to your next step, and like what did that look like for you?
Well, towards the end of my PhD, there were some few people in my group that were essentially sort of struggling getting by. And by that, I mean, there were a couple of people that they had kids and they didn't know if the next year we're going to have a job, because as we all know, it is very dependent on grants. You get grant funding and all of that. And I could see, these were people I was uh, working with every day, and I could see the stress that was putting on them. And they had like 10 years career ahead of me, and they were still like in that in that situation where they didn't have job security essentially. Plus that first of all, and I was like, well, I mean, and then at the end of my PhD, I'll be 33 when I graduated a couple of years ago. I was like, I like to start a family, and I don't know if I want to start a family with these premises. And also, I want more better work-life balance, which again, as we all know, doesn't often come by in the academic world. Yeah. So that was another reason that sort of put me off a bit. I mean, take it or leave it, but I was working, or like I was being exposed with egos in academia that I didn't necessarily like.
Yeah.
So basically I asked myself, okay, if I want to be a scientist and a researcher, what would be the conditions for me to do it? Basically it would be someone just giving me a bunch of money so I can be locked up in the lab and design experiments and run experiments, and I'll be happy. And quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. So I was like, yeah, so it's like, okay, I'll have to keep looking, like every 2 years I'll have to look for grants. I'm not sure if I'm going to get them because, that's one of the other truths, I think. Your heart might be in the right place when you're working on your topic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the hot topic. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the topic that is going to send you on hot publications, that is going to send you on Nature or the likes, and therefore that might not be the topic that is going to get you grants. And if it's not going to get you grants, you're not going to have a salary, basically, a job and money to work on that. So yeah, and plus again, I was seeing a lot of an ego in the academia world that was kind of tramping on the scientific discovery, and I didn't like that either. We used to work to prove an hypothesis or disprove an hypothesis. I feel like that's not the case anymore. Like if you disprove an hypothesis, meaning you get what are called negative data.
Yeah.
That's not so much interesting anymore. Long story short, those were all the reasons that kind of pushed me to reconsider what I want to do next.
You kind of took, after your PhD, you moved into research commercialization. How did you make that transition? Like, was there something that you got involved in that gave you that role? Like, what did that look like, and what did you end up doing for the last nearly 2 years?
3 years, actually.
3 years?
Yeah, almost 3 years.
So what did that? What was that, and kind of how did you get to that position, and what did you love about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I didn't know anything about commercialization of science, I didn't know that was a thing. So I basically started talking to people. I knew other PhDs that were either graduating and going off doing something else. And one of them was a friend of mine, and I was talking to her partner at the time, and he told me that she was working as commercialization manager at Otago Innovation Ltd, which is the tech transfer office for University of Otago. And I had a coffee with her, and she told me what she was doing. She basically told me all about commercialization. She told me what her day-to-day looked like. She told me how she got there, what she was working on, and all of that. And I got hooked, and I was like, okay, how do I go do that? And she basically put me in contact with the director of return on science and momentum programs at the time, and ended up having a coffee with him and a couple of other team members. I told them that I want to be involved in the commercialization space. I want to learn, so I didn't really mind what was going to be my role as long as I could be exposed to the environment to learn and basically figure out what it was all about. And he gave me a position as program analyst for the return on science momentum program, and basically I've done that for the past 3 years or so. And I had few opportunities along the way. So I was doing that and something else on the side, which I can tell you more about if you are interested. That's how that's involved.
So that's how it kind of progressed, which is really cool. So basically, by being curious and asking someone about their job and what they're up to,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
landed yourself a job without having to apply for anything or
Yeah.
be formally interviewed.
Yeah, I was basically asking other PhDs that were ahead of me, what are you doing now? Because I knew they weren't in academia anymore, but I didn't know what they were doing. I was like, what's your job?
What do you do? How do you get money?
Yeah, exactly. What are you doing now? How do you get money? And can I get in?
That's really cool. And then once you started in that role, that you said there are a few opportunities that kind of came your way, and did you get more and more curious about commercializing research? And like, is that a space that you love, or are you looking more now into the next phase in terms of like startups or running commercialization projects? Like, what do you think your passion point is after the experiences you've had?
I mean, my passion point is still working on commercialization of science. That kind of got reinforced when I was working for Eternal Science Momentum. I had the opportunity of a part-time internship with the Research and Innovation Office at University of Canterbury as a commercialization analyst, I think was my role at the time. And that kind of just reinforced because I had more insight on the day-to-day job. I had the chance to work more with commercialization advisors, with the team there and researchers and even the funding team over there. And I realized that what I enjoyed was basically, I mean, as naive and silly as it sounds, but I was meeting with the researchers that had what they thought was a brilliant idea, looking at it with them, not sort of criticizing or taking it apart, but looking at it with them and be like, okay, how do we take this outside of your lab into the real world? How do we make these not just profitable but usable by the public, basically? And that's me, like that's what still keeps me going, because again, researchers, they don't necessarily know about commercialization or the sort of pathway or the next steps. So I really enjoyed sitting with them, understanding their vision, understanding the problem they're trying to solve, and then help them navigate the commercialization path. Sort of the person in front or at the back that says, okay, we should go that way or we should go that way. And help them in a way kind of de-risk the process as much as you can and get, stumble at least a bit less in the dark. Because again, if you don't know much about commercialization, I think you might end up stumbling in the dark a lot. So yeah, that's what essentially was keeps me going still, and that what got me hooked.
Yeah, I think that was something that hooked me in initially as well, and still does. Like, I do like passing on that knowledge of bringing a researcher from what they do in the lab and what they think is important and what they think the real world wants, and then helping them on that journey to steer the boat of what it really is and how you really know that something is going to be commercial or commercializable. Yeah. And I think that like taking people on that journey and seeing them discover a new way to place their research into the world is really fun. And and I think that's really cool that you're super passionate about that still. And I think there are still lots of places that would be very interested in that skill set.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people do transition into commercialization roles and then get very attached to the idea of the startups and often tend to leave and go with a startup and then be part of the broader ecosystem. And I think having people that stay within that commercialization space and get really good in that space is also really valuable. So
yeah. I mean, I think you can do both. Like if you're passionate about both. When I was doing all of this at the same time, I got approached by a friend of mine that I used to be a flatmate of mine in Dunedin. He's an AI guy, got his PhD in AI and machine learning, and he had an idea for a startup in the agri-tech ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically approached me because he knew I was in the commercialization space. He knew I was connected, and he
Mm-hmm.
asked me for advice. And I mean, that was essentially the same thing I was sort of doing at the same time. I was just
Yeah.
doing it in my spare time. So I was helping him figuring out if this thing could have legs or like the right people to talk to. So it does. I think it doesn't have to be necessarily commercialization space from the lab or startup. Can be both. If you have the
Mm-hmm.
connection and the opportunity, and you're passionate about it, you're passionate about
Mm-hmm.
problem solving and strategy thinking and bringing ideas out there or like give them their own legs to work on. Yeah, do it.
Awesome. That's interesting. You touched on some skills there that clearly took you from PhD academic life and into this commercial space. So, what do you think you learned? What are the skills that you felt were really important that you did learn in your PhD or during study that you ended up taking with you? And I guess the other thing would also be, was there anything that you kind of had to like unlearn or like not think about or get too caught up in? Yeah, so like which ones did you use and which things were you just ignoring out of your academic training?
Hmm. I think the first thing that pops in my mind as skills I brought from my PhD is, I guess I mean, it's not a skill, it's kind of a trait that developed over the years studying, but it's the scientific brain. Like if you want to work in the commercialization of science and technology, you have to understand the lingo, you have to understand the science.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out that even though, again, my background was in biotech and neuroscience, when I was at RNI, Research and Innovation, I was working on a lot of engineering projects and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have a background in engineer, but what I can do is I can look at a topic and do everything I can to understand it. So grab a bunch of papers on the
Yeah.
topic and I'll read them and I'll learn. If we talk about skills, learning for a PhD, I think is a superpower. Because
Yeah.
if you have the scientific brain, if you have the curiosity, the passion, and you just need time to learn about
Mm-hmm.
a topic, you can definitely do it. You can definitely do it,
Yeah.
and it won't take that much time. I think because again, a lot of I feel like a lot of people when they go into their PhD, a lot of they'll pivot. I pivot from
Yeah.
biotech to neuroscience. They have never studied neuroscience essentially. All I need to know, I'll learn it from papers. So I
Yeah.
think that's skill that was definitely useful from my scientific background. Another skill was, I guess, the sort of critical eye. So looking at a
Mm-hmm.
problem or a topic, and for the lack of better words, is look at the weak spots. Not just the strong ones, but the weak spots. Because I think a lot of researchers, when they are in love with an idea, they kind of learn to sell it to you, right? They learn how to sell an idea, how to sell smoke, and they sort of ignore all the not so sexy parts of it or the parts that might damage their narrative. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you have to be aware of it because if someone spots them when you are an academic, you have to be able to defend your idea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, how you get the critical eye, the critical thinking of looking at something and be like, okay, this is great, but I see a few weak spots here and there.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to look at those when we need to work on those. So that's another thing that I think I brought from my PhD. Something I had to sort of leave behind, and again, I might be called out on this, but researchers, academics, when they have an idea, they often want to back it up with a lot of data, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
experiments, a lot of strong experiments, and blah, blah, blah. Because again, you have to sell that idea, you have to defend that
Yeah.
idea. So you want to have as many arrows as you can possibly get, essentially, to prove that you're right. And I think that doesn't necessarily translate well in the startup ecosystem or the innovation commercialization of science and technology ecosystem. Sometimes, you have to kind of go for the leap of faith.
Yeah.
You can't, I feel like you can't, if you have a value proposition, can
Mm-hmm.
strengthen the value proposition, of course, you can back it up, but you can
Mm-hmm.
get caught up too much into doing that
Yeah.
in kind of that self-asserting loop. You have
Yeah.
to, at some point, go talk to someone and be like, here's what we got, what do you think?
Yeah.
You know? Or
that's actually a
like,
good point.
yeah,
Yeah. I think like people get too caught up in knowing everything about what it is they're building before they've even talked to a customer, or basically you just need to do the minimum to move forward and then
yeah,
move
yeah,
forward. And I think that's the thing that you kind of have to forget about when you're in commercialization versus pure academia and research and publications. And they can coexist, but yeah, you do need to be wary that to move forward in a commercial space, you maybe don't do the everything that you might have done. And sometimes you do different things just to prove or disprove in terms of a patent. Like I've done that before as well, where I had to do an experiment that I just wouldn't have done otherwise.
mm,
But it was more for like a patent position, and it's just a little bit different.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Again, I don't think
Mm.
that's not that necessarily translates well in the
Mm.
commercialization space.
Yeah, it's not valued the same way. I think that's the way to
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And then you get more value, like getting out of the lab or getting out of the, building the MVP, the prototype, and going talking to
Mm.
people. Because that's another thing, like that I've seen in the commercialization space is that people will spend a lot of time building something, and
Mm.
then they'll go talk to someone, customer, possible
Yeah.
investor, whatever, and they'll be like, yeah, it's not 100% relevant, and then back to the drawing board, back working
That's
to
it.
the bench and working again on and changing, pivoting, whatever. So yeah, I think my rambling was like was around to not get stuck too much on the building phase without
Mm.
having feedback from the outside, because you might realize too late that you're working on the wrong thing.
That's a very important point is proper customer research
Yeah,
earlier or just feedback. Otherwise, you're kind of
yeah,
working on things that you assumed were a problem but may not
yeah,
be
yeah,
when it
yeah,
comes to
yeah,
research commercialization for sure. And I think more and more academic research will have that input of sort of stakeholder engagement now
yeah,
anyway
yeah,
in terms of impact, and it's not just going to be something that commercialization will do. I think it'll be something that also exists in a traditional academic setting as well. So
yeah.
yeah.
And that kind of brings back to your question, like what did you have to leave behind when you
Mm-hmm.
transition? And I mean, I don't know if that I necessarily left behind, but I found out that I need to be more open to criticism. And I
Mm.
think like a lot of researchers are not very good at it, because again, they are selling an idea, but they're also defending
Mm.
it, right? Like whether they publish, they
Yeah.
go to conference, blah, blah, blah. There'll be always someone that stick their hand up and be like, they won't go like this, but they'll be like, I think you're wrong, and this is why.
Yeah.
And then you're like, no, I think you're wrong, and then they get caught up in that. But that doesn't work in the commercialization space, because if you're not receptive to,
Such a good point.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you're not receptive to criticism and you don't take
Mm.
them on board, you can have all the conversations you want, but you won't know if you are on the right track or not, because you're not listening. You are approaching conversations with again the academia mentality, where I'm like, here's my idea, here's why it's super cool, and here is all the things I can tell you to prove that it's super cool. And then when someone is like, yeah, but actually, have you considered this? Or like, yeah, but it might not be as hot as you think. A lot of people be like, they just shut down and be like, don't want to listen this. You're just trying to bring me down or whatever,
Yeah.
which I don't think is
I
often the
think
case.
I think I was the same. I think I found it really hard to take on feedback
Mm,
because you're right. You go into your PhD exam and you're defending your thesis, and when you
yeah,
get your critique on a paper, you're like rebutting the, criticism.
yeah,
You're always in a defensive position, and you're always trying to
yeah,
put that thing forward. And that's a very different mindset to say someone else is just giving you a feedback or a change or a
hmm,
possible, like a market idea about what a
yeah,
real problem is. And it's not that your research was bad, or it's not a reflection of anything negative,
yeah,
but it's just
yeah.
a feedback. Yeah. And I think I struggle with that.
Are the people that can
Mm.
see that you know the things you don't know, and you are open to learn. You are coachable. You're open to
Yeah.
criticism, because it's perfectly fine not having all the answers. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that we forget in academia. It's perfectly fine not to have the right answers. What is not okay is realizing that you don't have the answers and just either making them up, ignoring the problem, and not looking for the answers. Yeah.
Oh, yes, 100% that. That's awesome. That was very insightful because I think that's something I struggle with and didn't even realize until this conversation. Thank you for that mild therapy lesson. Very impressed. Awesome. Well, I guess we've covered a lot. Is there anything that like you want to do next? So right now you're kind of in this crossroad position, and you
Mm.
still seem to really like helping researchers bring their work from the lab and into the real world. And I think you're really insightful with that. Is that what you want to kind of continue? You're open to startups, joining like early founding member of the
Uh,
startup, or yeah, what is it that you're after right now?
that's a big question. I mean, at the moment, I'm still working with my friend on his startup. We are going through the Sprout Agritech Accelerator. We are having a lot of fun, and we are having a lot of interesting conversations. And I'm enjoying that kind of work. I'm enjoying being part of the team that has an idea and is trying to figure out if the idea has legs and what those legs look like, if you know what I mean, and kind of help strategize and problem solving and see if we can get these on the market. So I'm really enjoying that work. And I think that's kind of the link between, again, working for a startup or as commercialization manager in a TTO or investment manager in a venture capitalist firm. So I guess, and that this might be a too general answer, but what I'm looking next is exactly that. I don't really mind what that looks like.
Mhm.
As long as I can keep doing what I'm doing, what I've been doing for the 3 years, which is kind of shedding a light for founders and researchers that are kind of approaching the commercialization space and they need assistance, they need a different set of eyes, they need someone that helps them, I guess, learn how to talk to customers or potential investors, potential partners. Someone that is kind of their Swiss knife and is
Yeah,
helping them there. Yeah.
yeah,
So again,
moving
what that
forward.
looks like, yeah, what that looks like, whether it's for a startup or a
Mm.
TTO or a VC, I don't really mind because I see the connecting link in all those environments. I don't see them very different. Of course, there'll be some nuances that are different, but what they are trying to achieve, all three of these settings are, to me, are all the same, which is finding a way to get a good idea out there on the
Mm.
market that can be profitable for the people that have spent an insane amount of time and effort in building that idea, of course, because you want to reward them, but also that can be profitable for the people out there that might need that idea in their lives. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want to learn, um, you know, to add to your skill set as like something that might be a small project? Is there anything that you are thinking like, I wish I had a little bit more experience in, I don't know, business development or sales, or is there anything that you're like, I wish I had a little bit more so I could offer that as a consultant or anything like that? Is there?
I mean, I wish I had a bit more experience in like deal flow, if you know what I mean. Like,
Mm,
I've
sales
seen
cycle.
in yeah, yeah, exactly. Like I've seen a lot of that with my job, but I wasn't like I wish I was more. I had the chance of being more part of it, or be more
Mm,
part of a deal, a sale, an investment case to see how that works. How those conversations. I wish I had more hands-on
mm,
experience on that, which I guess I'm trying to gain with the work I'm doing with this
yeah.
startup, right? Yeah, I wish I had a bit more experience so that I could be a bit more helpful with that instead
Mm,
of like learning along the way as I'm doing, fake it till you make
yeah.
it. Uh,
Yeah, I'm the same. There's like little pockets of things I wish I had a little bit more experience in. And those are things that, like, if someone approached me to do, then I'd say, yep, because I, really do want to learn that thing as a proper piece to say that I have experience in that. There's like little parts of the
yeah,
ecosystem that I haven't quite been in, if that makes sense. And the more experience that I can have with that, the more stronger I can be as like a founding member of
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how I like to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I can give a bit of more positive view on that is to whoever wants to work in a start, like as a team member, founding team member of a startup, or wants to work with a startup, I feel like, and again, I'm talking by personal experience, I think like that's a great place where to be. If you feel you don't have all certain skill sets, you're definitely gonna get them in a startup environment, because when you work in a startup environment, you wear different hats, whether you feel like they fit well or not, but you have to wear them because someone has to. So yeah, it's a great learning experience. So if you're thinking about it and you're like, I'm not sure because I don't have all the skills that might be required, do it. Like if you have some of those and you can still bring value to the table, do it, because I promise the other team members might not have the skills that you have already. And you all have to wear different hats, and you all have to help each other, and you learn from one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the accelerator program you're on is probably like giving you that.
Yeah.
In a very nice sort of packaged way, having that project to work on. And that's kind of what I found with my founder program that I'm on as well. But yeah, it's like marketing, business development, strategy, like go to market, sales pipeline, like things that I just didn't think as a scientist that I would talk about. Well, I think that's all we have time to go over today. So thank you very much for having a chat with me today, Gio. It was wonderful to hear about your experience, and I really hope that you continue on your journey and you learn lots of new things. And where can people find you if they want to have a coffee with you or a virtual coffee with you? Perfect. I'll put your LinkedIn in the post anyway. So yep, have a catch up with Gio. Thank you very much.
As we wrap up this episode, we hope you found the insights and stories shared today both inspiring and thought-provoking. If you're eager to connect with like-minded individuals and collaborate on exciting projects, we invite you to join the free LabMates platform. It's a vibrant community where innovation meets collaboration, and your next big idea could be just a conversation away. Sign up today and start building your network.